The talk is called Subversive Seedlings. And I love that word subversive because it makes the teachers in here cringe. A lot of them are probably thinking the last thing we need are more subversive 16 and 17-year-olds. I'm here to tell you that is exactly what AAS needs. To me, one of life's biggest mysteries and paradoxes is that we are in a world that is constantly changing. And yet we fight tooth and nail to resist that. Everything from the kind of microevolution of bacterium and viruses all the way up to the ever-expanding nature of our universe screams that life will not stay the same. And yet we can't help but hold on to the things that we're comfortable with, the things that we know. We don't like change. What's fascinating is this spreads even beyond just ourselves. This spreads into our political and our social and our economic systems. Every aspect of our lives, this fear of change pervades into. And many times these systems turn to violence in order to resist that change. They exploit, they oppress, they push down anybody who tries to voice something against that. They fight very hard to keep the way of life that they know and don't like things that are different that they don't know. This is common, this is everywhere. And yet, every so often, amidst this violence and this fear of change, somebody or somebodies, they stop and ask, does it have to be this way? And today, we're going to talk about that very question. I had the opportunity to work with quite a few of you over the last year and a half that I've been in Moscow. Some of you have seen me before. If you haven't seen me, you've probably either smelled some of my work or tasted it. I work for an NGO here, as our announcer said, and we work with racism, and we try and stop racism. And we also, I'm the agricultural head of a farming co-op, a CSA, that's in the Oblast. Last spring, we partnered with some of the third grade classes, the Girl Scouts, and the Environmental Club to plant about 2,000 seedlings in the school. They were all over the middle school corridor. If you didn't see them, you probably smelled them. And all those little seedlings, they were subversive. You see, those seedlings weren't just ordinary lettuce or spinach or chard or kale plants. They were the first steps in an effort to treat some of the most marginalized people in this city with respect and dignity. They were the first steps in moving people towards a more just and equitable future. And they offered hope, and that is a very subversive thing. Before I came to Moscow about a year and a half ago, I got an email from my boss saying that I'd be leaving the US and coming here to work with Africans, with migrants and refugees who found themselves stuck in this bustling city of 14 million people. I don't know if you know this, but in Moscow, there are about 1.5 million migrants and refugees here, and then there are about another million or so undocumented migrants and refugees. So you can probably imagine my surprise when I got here and was told that the people who I'd come halfway around the world to work with and the issues that I was here to work with don't exist in Russia. Officially, that is. Officially, there is no problem with immigration and Africans immigrating to Moscow. And officially, there is no problem with racism or xenophobia. That was solved decades ago. Officially, there aren't young women being brought here from places like Nigeria or the Ivory Coast or the Democratic Republic of Congo for sex slavery. Officially, these things don't exist. Needless to say, when I got here, I found out pretty quickly that these things do exist, that there are huge issues, and unfortunately, there are very few people doing anything about it. Now, fortunately, there are a handful of organizations, NPC, social services being one of them, that have decided to ask the question, does it have to be this way? And they've said no. For decades now, these groups, they've been following kind of a long-established model of aid and development called needs-based direct aid. It's exactly what it sounds like. You directly address needs. For example, if somebody is hungry, you give them food. If somebody is cold, you get them clothing. If somebody is sick, you provide medical care. Now, these approaches, they have been essential, vital, over the last few decades, and they've been life-saving for many people. So I don't want to discredit them, but they can be a bit short-sighted. So some people asked, does it have to be this way? And they responded with kind of an old axiom, give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime. I know you've probably all heard that before. And so the organization I work for, about 3 years ago, they realized that most of our clients, most of the people we work with, have agricultural backgrounds. They were farmers back in their home countries before they came here. And after realizing this, we made a decision to start a farm. We were going to teach people to fish. Not literally, but you get the idea. Instead of giving them food or food assistance, we'd give them jobs. We'd start a farm, we'd use conventional methods, we'd pay a fair wage, and we would help people get out of the situations that they were in. Plans were made, preparations were taken, but the project never got off the ground. And there are a number of reasons why I think this happened, but the most important of these is that we forgot that question that I keep repeating. We didn't take the step back and ask the bigger question that's oftentimes missed in development. We need to ask, who owns the pond, and why does the fish seem so scarce? And so we did just that. We started doing some research, and we started looking at some of the countries that our clients are coming from. Does anyone want to take a guess what the annual family income is in the DRC? Any numbers? No, way less. $430 US a year is the annual income in the Democratic Republic of Congo. 71% of the country is below the poverty line. The average life expectancy is 50 years. So remember those numbers. At the same time, the multinational plantations in the DRC, they're exporting over 1 million tons of plantains every year. They're exporting 224,000 tons of sweet potatoes, and 313,000 tons of bananas, and 84,000 tons of yams, and 193,000 tons of pineapples. Agriculture is booming in the DRC. So where's the money going? It's clearly not going to the 66% of the country who's employed in the agribusiness. And so it came as no surprise to us when we started seeing these numbers that college-educated agronomists and farmers were leaving their country. They were watching it get stripped of its resources and couldn't make even close to a living wage. And so they're being forced to flee by something entirely out of their control. Do things have to be this way? So we answered no. And we decided, let's take this farm idea, and let's take this information we had just gathered, and let's make it sustainable. We decided that we would use organic principles rather than the kind of pesticide-heavy, fungicide-heavy, conventional methods that were being used in other places, particularly other countries they're coming from. We decided that we were going to share the financial risk, so the consumers would have some of that risk instead of just the farmer. So if something didn't grow, instead of the farmer not being able to eat or getting any money, the consumer had to absorb some of that. We, as a community, tried to address these issues. We decided that we were going to help with direct aid by taking food that was grown and give it back to the community. So we're helping all these different levels at once. But most importantly, we educated our farmers in a new way. We taught them sustainable growing practices that were easy, that were cheap, and that they could take home with them when they finally get out of Moscow. At the same time, we were able to convince customers and our consumers to actually meet the men and women who grow the food that they eat. Not many people can say that they're doing that. Not many people know where their breakfast came from. And we decided that was going to be key. We got people to start shopping locally rather than supporting these corporations that were forcing millions of people out of West Africa into foreign countries to try and find work and a new life. We even convinced many of these individuals, most of whom had never been on a farm before, to come out of the city, to go out to the countryside, and to farm for a while. This last season alone, we had 66 volunteers from 15 different countries, spent a total of 1,448 hours working on the Seeds of Hope farm. And throughout all of this, something incredible happened. Many of these migrants and refugees that we work with, who have never been able to show pride or ownership in the work that they do in this country, they were able to start doing so. They poured themselves into this project. They made it their own, and they were able to start dreaming about something different, something new. And when they did this, they challenged the way that things have always been done. Now, I don't have any grand illusions about our little 3-hectare farm in the Russian countryside forcing these multinational agricultural businesses to change their ways. It's not going to happen overnight. I don't think it will. I wish it could, but it won't. I know that the handful of people that we work with are just a speck when compared to the millions of migrants in Moscow who are trying to find a better life here. But I know that this project, it's caused ripples in the minds of students, and teachers, and families, and businessmen and women, and people who work at the embassies. And those ripples aren't going to stop. Because people have now started asking this question, does it have to be this way? And they've started answering no. And this is where y'all come in. I want to challenge each and every one of you to become more conscious consumers when it comes to the food that you eat. I want you to think about the role that a lot of the companies you're buying your food from are playing in the global picture. I want you to think about how these corporations are forcing people from their homelands or paying them near slave wages because they can, because that's the way it's been done. Now, I'll be the first to admit that being a sustainable consumer is not always easy. It usually means that you'll have to eat what's in season rather than what you're craving. It means in Moscow, no more mangoes and kiwis in December. That can be hard. But think of the other option. Who's getting hurt by you buying those mangoes and kiwis in December in Moscow? You know, maybe you'll have to pay a bit more money on milk and cheese and eggs and those kind of things in your fridge. And you'll definitely have to spend more time at the grocery store reading labels and signs and finding out where your food's coming from and who is either being helped or hurt in the process. But as people make conscious efforts to become more ethical in their consumption, and they make conscious efforts to engage with local growers, the global market, it's forced to change. If enough families or individuals like your own refuse to buy products that have been unsustainably or unethically produced, these major producers, they'll have a dilemma. They either change their ways or they start losing profits. Now I look out, I see a lot of seniors here. And I know a lot of you are getting ready to graduate, and I know you're excited to get out of Moscow or go to another country. But wherever you're going, I want to leave you with this challenge. Wherever you end up, make the effort to become a more sustainable consumer. If you're a rural part of the country or part of the world, get to know your local farmers. Find a farmer's market. Become a part of a CSA or a co-op. If you end up in a big city, get involved in community gardens. Learn about vertical gardening or urban gardening efforts. Teach people in cities what it's like to grow things or where their food comes from. But most importantly, I want you to ask the question that I've been asking over and over and over again. Does it have to be this way? Does our current exploitative and unsustainable agricultural system have to be this way? And if the answer is no, I want you to do something about it. Thank you.